is going to talk about serverless apps and streaming networks. So here you go.
Thank you very much. All right, am I live? Cool. Thank you. I'm going to talk about serverless apps with a data stream network, building an MMOWAM, which will become clear very shortly. So the concept is I want to build a casual gaming MMO. And you probably ask, why would you wish to do something like this, something so ridiculous? Oh, right, I can't see my notes at the same time. All right, they're going to hate me for this now. And of course, it's on the wrong one. Oh, come on. All right, forget it. We're not going to do the... All right. You'll just have to see my speaker notes here. We're going to build a casual gaming MMO. And this is something that I hope can have 50 or more people playing at the same time. And we're going to do it without writing any server code at all. And your first question is probably, why would you want to do this? MMOs are built around servers. Well, so my name's Josh. I am the head of developer relations at PubNub. We have a service that lets lots of people scale real-time applications. We're a data stream network, which essentially means that you publish a piece of data into our network, and it gets where it needs to go, which could be a single endpoint, it could be multiple endpoints, and it's all load balanced and low latency and everything around the world, and you don't have to worry about how it gets there. Now, usually when I do these talks, we talk about all the common use cases. People make casual games, like the Ellen Show had a game using our stuff. They track cars, like the Lyft app, see where the car is. You want to track that in real time. We talk about IoT sensors. We talk about sending the little hearts in Twitter Periscope. But most of all, chat applications. People write lots of chat applications, and so that's usually what I do in my demos, and it makes sense because a very large fraction of our customer base does chat applications, and it needs to be interactive and real time, and I am so bored of it. I don't want to do any more chat applications. So I decided, you know what, for this, let's build a game. We're going to do it with no server-side code. There will be a web server to host the pages, but no code executing on the server. I know it seems sacrilege here at Node.js. There will not be any actual Node code involved. It will all be client-side. There will be no authentication. There will be no syncing database. This is just static content, a multiplayer casual game. Massively multiplayer online whack-a-mole. Now, what we're going to have is there will be a dashboard where players can view the game. And you can imagine this being like at, say, a tech conference up on a big screen, or in a bar on a TV. Some sort of dashboard to show like who's currently winning the game. And I want this to be really, not just low latency during playing the game, but really easy to get involved. I shouldn't have to download an app. I shouldn't have to create an account. I should just be able to jump in and play. And it's on a device. It's up there on the big screen. But we want anybody with their own device to be able to actually interact with and play with the game. So this is what our dashboard is going to look like. Players view the dashboard, and then they'll just load a URL to join the game and compete head-to-head. And you'll notice we have a special URL there, which I'll get to in a second. And this is what the client will look like on a phone. So everybody will have this running on their own phone with the cleverly named MMOWAM. Now, building the game, I was going to say gaming is easy, but you will see that there are a few bugs in my demo application. So while the networking concepts work fine, the actual game does have a few bugs. But in general, we know how to make a video game. Like, there are frameworks that handle all of this stuff. We know the common patterns. The networking is actually a lot more difficult. So if we're going to do this without a server, there's a couple problems we need to solve. How do you host a network game without a server? How do you host multiple game groups and then connect to them? How do you connect quickly to the URL on a phone? Because typing in a long URL can be error-prone. How do you tell players apart? If you don't have any user accounts, then everybody logged in as anonymous. So how do you tell the person who won that they won? And how do you keep everything in sync? Well, to host the actual networking part without a server, you use a data stream network. And that is what PubNub does, and these are some of our competitors. These are not like syncing databases. These are stateless networks. You send a message into it, and it goes to the other end. It's all HTTP underneath, and there are no LANs. Everything is over the internet, so we're not using rendezvous or local networking, nothing like that, which has some advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage is that everything is just a link on the web, which means that you can do all the things that you do with links. You can tweet them, you can share them. It's the magic of the web. It's just part of the network provided as a service. Now, using the data stream network underneath, everything can scale, and we don't have to worry about how it works. This would be great for things like kiosks at the mall, or big billboards, or large shared maps. So, to actually connect to the network, all you have to do is say, import the JavaScript code, and then connect to PubNub, put in your public key and your subscribe key, and a universal ID for this client, which in this case is dashboard. So, now we can get our dashboard onto the web, onto the network, but how do we host multiple games? Well, the first thing we're going to need there we go. If we want to host multiple games at once, we need a way for people to connect to them. And we could create a unique ID and say, hey, connect to this, but that would be, you're asking someone to type in this long random string of letters and numbers. So instead, let's give them a long random string of colors and flavors and animals. So I created a couple different sets of values, and I generate the channel name by using the pick function, which just randomly chooses one of those. So my channel name will now be, say, red sweet chipmunk, or blue salty bear. That's something that is random, but most people would be able to type this in pretty easily without making a typo. This is what creates the channel name. And in PubNub terms, channel is the stream that you're sending data along, and anybody can subscribe to that, anybody can publish to it, as long as you have the access keys, which everybody does, and the channel name. So if we want to host multiple games at once, we just need multiple channel names, and that's why we do the random. Once you have a channel name, then you just publish to it. You don't have to set it up, you don't have to log into an admin console to create the channel, just use it and it exists. In this case, I'm publishing a message called, where the type is action and the action is start. And that will be sent to all the players saying it's time to start the game. So now we have a channel for our game. How are you going to join it? Well, in the client, we could put up a nice little dialog box and ask them to type it in. But it'd also be nice if we could just store that in the URL so that you can send that link to somebody and say, hey, join me at this game in this particular chat room channel, and it's all part of the URL. So we can do that using standard DOM APIs. I'm using process location, pull out the parameters with a simple split, gives me key value pairs, and now I can see if the channel name has been set, and then connect to it. So this is what our URL is going to look like, which is kind of long. It'll work. This is great for emailing. But if somebody's just walking along, they just enter the room, you want them to be able to type it in. And typing in a long URL could be error-prone. So let's generate a QR code instead. I found this amazing JavaScript library, which fundamentally you give a URL, and it creates a QR code for it using HTML Canvas, pops up right in the middle of your web page. It doesn't have to go to a server-side process. There's no native code underneath. It's pretty straightforward, and you can even customize how big you want it to be and what you want the dark and light colors to be, so you can make it match the color scheme. So that is our dashboard. In this case, I just hard-coded the channel to foo, and it generated a URL automatically, and this is everybody who's logged in. We can see these are all the players, and they currently have a score of none because we haven't played anything yet, but we can see that there's 4 active players. Now, next problem. How are we going to actually tell everybody apart? I want this to be really casual, so I don't want people to have to OAuth with their Facebook account. Like, I don't need to get your email address just so you can play a couple rounds of this game. I don't want you to have to create a new account. Well, if there's no accounts, that means there's no usernames and no avatars, so how do we actually display what people look like? How do we know who wins? Again, let's just take some random information and pick one. So I chose a bunch of icons, which these are animals that I found an icon set for: elephant, giraffe, hippo, and then a bunch of adjectives. And I calculate a UUID, adjective, and animal for each one. Now you'll notice I included the code here for calculate adjective. What I'm doing is actually checking to see if it's in session storage first. If it's not, then I'm going to save it to session storage and then return it. And the reason I do this is if somebody hits reload on their page, we don't want them to generate a new user ID and all the information, or else you could hit reload 5 times and now you've created 5 phantom players in there. So it now lives as long as the session does, which according to Mozilla Docs, the session storage lasts as long as that tab or window does. So you can't have multiple sessions in the same browser as long as they're separate windows. So that gives us, it's a nice balance between permanence and temperance. Then we also use that name for the actual icon, which I'm going to use as the avatar. Now, how do we get this to all of the other players and to the dashboards? So I said that the data stream network doesn't have any state. That's not strictly true. It does have a UUID for every person who's connected to the network, which you can set yourself, or it'll generate a random one if you don't. You can also add little bits of extra information to be carried along with that the network will preserve. And we call this state. So in this case, I have this player state object, which is everything I care about in the game on the player side. Their UUID, their adjective, the icon I'm using, and their current score. So whenever any of those things change, I'm just going to call the state method to PubNub and send that out to the network. And then anybody who cares to listen to it will be notified. Now, how do we actually get this? So the dashboard is listening with a subscribe to our channel name, and whenever a message comes in, that message function is called. If something disconnects, the disconnect function will be called. Then we also have something called presence. So in addition to the main channel that we're sending the messages on, there's a presence channel which lets you know when somebody leaves or enters or if they time out. And it handles, in addition, all of the state changes. So if a player hasn't actually sent a message, but they have changed their state, then that will show up in my presence callback. The reason it's separate from the message callback is a lot of subscribers don't actually need to care about the presence, but the ones who do can access it. So all I do is wait for those presence events. It will include not only somebody who left or joined, but also the current occupancy of the whole channel. I subtracted by 1 because I don't want to count myself, meaning the dashboard, as one of the players. And then if it's a state change action, then I just update my local copy of the player state. So how do we actually keep the game board in sync? Once the game starts, all of the players are going to have a little thing, a little countdown timer, and then the game will start, and they'll receive a sequence of dots that pop on and off, and they have to hit the same sequence. Now, in order to be fair, we want to make sure that every player gets the exact same sequence. So how do we do that? Well, the dashboard for every time could just send out, okay, this is this mole, and this is this mole, and this is this mole. We have mole events splitting all over the place. Or we could just generate a gigantic list of mole places randomly and then send that to everybody before the game starts. But there's actually an easier way. We're going to use a pseudo-random seed. So we talk a lot about random numbers. Computers in general don't use true random numbers. They use pseudo-random numbers, which means it will generate a sequence of numbers that looks like it's random, but it begins with a certain particular value that we call a seed. And if you always start with that seed, you will always get the exact same sequence, which is why typically what you'll do is use the current time on the computer, like just the milliseconds part, as your seed to make it more random. In this case, we want the fact that we can get the exact same sequence. So that means all I need to do is transmit the seed to every player, and then they can generate the exact same sequence of moves, as long as they have the same random function on it. Some platforms provide access to that seed. JavaScript does not. So instead, I found this simple equation here. Under pick random whole, what it does is it gets the current length of the grid, which right now the grid is always 16 squares. Using the current math seed, it runs it through this equation to produce a new math seed, then divides it by that number to get the random value, and then scales by the max and min to return the final value. So every time this function is called, it will update the random seed to use for generating the next one. As long as we start with that same initial seed, it will give us the same sequence. I can't explain the math to you behind this particular. Basically, it's a bunch of arithmetic using prime numbers that will give you something that looks pretty good as a random sequence. You wouldn't use that for cryptography, but for a game like ours, it's fine. So to make sure everybody gets the random seed, when I press the start game button, it's going to generate a new random seed and then publish the start action and include along with it the random seed. Now everybody can start at the exact same time and see the exact same sequence. So now, hope the network cooperates with me here. We are going to do this. By the way, this music is provided by a friend of mine named Philip Serino, who's an amazing composer here in Portland. So, we are Blue Spicy Wolf. Shrink these down a little. Now, when I hit the start button, everybody's game starts at once. Of course, I can't really easily play against myself, but oh, I think somebody sneaked in and joined my game. I just see Snarky Giraffe just showed up. Alright, it's almost over. Silly Monkey wins. Fatality. Alright. Thank you. Okay, so that is the essence of how we build a game without any server infrastructure. Of course, to make it pretty, to make it a good game, we need to make it nice. You'll notice all of this stuff scales. So this is not a bunch of canvas drawing. This is HTML, but it's using Flexbox to center. Don't mess with CSS margins or any of that crap anymore. Use Flexbox. It works everywhere. I also discovered the viewport values are now CSS properties that you can use. And vmin and vmax will give you whichever is smaller or larger of the width or the height, divided by 100, which means vmin will be like 1% of the smaller of the width or height, which you can then use to make things that will stretch and expand as you expand the browser, but always fit within it. And here's a little bit of CSS that I created to do that. So everything is inside of the screen object, and then I have a wrapper div around it. The screen wrapper is positioned absolute, and set it display flex align vertically, which is what align item center does, align horizontally centered would justify content, and then make it fill the width of the browser. Then the screen inside, which is now going to be fully centered, sets its width and height to be 160 vmin and 100 vmin, which gives me a 16 by 10, HD TV style ratio. And then I set the font size to 1 vmin, which means as the browser increases, the base font size for everything else is also going to increase. So as long as you do relative sizing for everything, you get this nice scalable thing that works. The music, again, was by my friend Philip Serino. I found these icons from Kenny that was on Open Game Art, and they have a really cute selection, and that's how I chose the animals. Now, future work, I think, yes, this was fun to make a casual game, but I like this concept of party apps, which is a game that you go play at a party. Yes, it's multiplayer, but everybody's in the same physical space. And it's fun even for spectators, which is why I really wanted the dashboard. So even if you're not playing, you can be rooting along with, whoever. These are multiple screens working together for the common good. And it's completely frictionless. No installing apps, no accounts. Doesn't matter what operating system you're running or what version. You just load this URL and it works. No server required. And in the future, we can imagine, taking old games and remixing them in new ways. Like, what would a 10-person version of Tetris look like? Head-to-head Tetris. What would it look like if you had massively multiplayer Snake, where at every step, the audience votes should the snake turn left or right, and only one wins? What would it look like if you could present on stage and people could kibitz and little messages from them would pop up while you're presenting, like the old pop-up videos? So, my name is Josh Marinacci. I'm Josh at pubnub.com, and if you would like, let's try it all playing, and we'll see if we can crash the network. So that link does not work, so you want to use Josh on Design. Oops. You're going to want to use Josh on Design p apps MMOWAM /player, or if you can try this QR code. Well, somebody got in. I can try mine. This can be Josh on Design /p apps MMOWAM /player. What was that? In practical limits, about 10,000 per channel. If you need more than that, we have aggregate functions called channel groups. But effectively, like, we send over 1 trillion messages a month, so don't worry about it. Oh, and we have a free layer that is about 1 million messages a month in your account. So unless you're going into production, you will never go over that limit. All right, I think we have enough players. Let's go. Ready, set. Clearly I should have made my score bars longer. Everybody wins. Sweet Elephant wins. Thank you.